Every one of these men and women has done something exceptional, and every one has been recognised for it. This year's operational honours were announced at Lancaster House, situated close to Buckingham Palace in London. Lance Corporal Josh Leakey is the only living veteran of the Afghan conflict to be awarded the highest award for gallantry in the face of the enemy, the Victoria Cross.
This time last week, I was, in Brecon on exercise, doing a course, and now I'm here in London in a posh house.
He's been honoured the award almost 70 years after another member of his family was awarded the same honour. Sergeant Nigel Gray Leakey was a posthumous recipient of the Victoria Cross in November 1945 for his gallantry while fighting in Africa during the Second World War. Lance Corporal Leakey, however, was on Operation HERRICK. He was part of a unit deployed to disrupt a group of insurgents when they were pinned down on a hillside. Not only did he run to help a wounded officer, but ran back up the hill to get a machine gun working, back down again to fetch another, and carry back up the 200-metre steep hill, re-engage the insurgents, all with 60 pounds of equipment on his back and under fierce enemy fire.
Displaying gritty leadership, well above that expected of his rank, Lance Corporal Leakey's actions single-handedly regained the initiative and prevented considerable loss of life, allowing a wounded US Marine Corps officer to be evacuated. For this act of valour, Lance Corporal Leakey is highly deserving of significant national recognition. Lance Corporal Joshua Leakey.
He's still worried, though, about what his comrades will say.
Probably going to get absolutely thrashed to within an inch of my life, but there you go. That happens all the time anyway, so it doesn't make a difference. If it wasn't this, it'd be something else.
140 servicemen and women are being honoured this year. What makes them so special?
So normally they're the outcome of a particular event in an operational environment is the result of a team. But just every now and then you spot something where an individual has made a critical personal impact, which has enabled that team to excel, or for a particular event to go our way.
Receiving a military cross is Captain William Hall. After being shot in the head from an insurgent ambush, he continued to assist a comrade with first aid, return fire and then call for artillery assistance. But telling his family about his honour was quite interesting.
Emotional, I suppose. I explained to my mother and also to my girlfriend that I'd never left Camp Bastion during the tour to try and make them, sort of allay their fears. It was my second tour and it seemed the thing to do. So obviously then having to tell the mother something vaguely different ended in a few tears, a quick punch from me before I think my dad kind of talked her around, and she's on board now, I think.
Up next was Flight Lieutenant Laura Nicholson, who's been awarded a Distinguished Flying Cross for her bravery as a Chinook pilot for the immediate response team. Whilst in a highly hostile area, the Chinook came under heavy fire. Her team had to return fire to secure the helicopter landing site, and then safely managed 2 journeys to evacuate 2 separate casualties back to Camp Bastion Hospital.
His composure and steadfastness, undoubtedly preventing further casualties.
Showing utter disregard for his own protection, Sergeant Christopher Brown stood in the open, suppressing the enemy until his comrade who'd become a casualty could be moved safely to a waiting helicopter. He receives a mention in dispatches. Forces TV interviewed Staff Sergeant Kate Lord while she was a physical training instructor at the Afghan National Army Officers Academy in Kabul. She receives a Queen's Commendation for bravery for her work of developing the female physical training capacity at the academy, insisting that it be integrated with the men's.
They do circuit classes together, they go on runs together, which was unheard of, and the men were actually taking them seriously and actually listening to them. So even in that short 9-month period, we saw masses of progress.
The Queen's Gallantry Medal, Petty Officer Russell James Adams, Royal Navy.
Petty Officer Russell Adams from the Royal Navy. In desperate conditions and with all other options exhausted, he risked his life repeatedly to rescue 5 fishermen from almost certain death when a 24-metre French fishing vessel was badly damaged in a storm off the coast of Leakey. He's awarded a Queen's Gallantry Medal.
I just happened to be on shift that night, and I know for sure that any other air crewman that was on shift that night would have done exactly the same thing. And it wasn't sort of the only job that we had over that period of storms. There was quite a few rescues, in particular fishing vessels as well, so I'm not sure why that one was picked out, really.
2 servicemen from the RAF who were in the same search and rescue mission both received awards. An Air Force Cross went to Flight Lieutenant Ian Campbell, and a Queen's Gallantry Medal went to Sgt Daniel Allanson. The operation to rescue a fisherman who'd been lost overboard off the coast of the Falkland Islands started in the pitch black at night. The torrential rain, low cloud, reduced visibility, 45-foot sea swell and 55 miles per hour winds further hampered the search. But against all odds, the casualty was spotted.
Because the aircraft was moving around a lot and because of the waves, they had to give me slightly more cable. So when I actually made contact with the guy initially, the cable got wrapped around my legs. So the priority is not to let go of the guy once you have a hold of him, because you just want to get the guy into the aircraft. So I was trying to kind of maintain a grip of the guy while trying to untangle the cable around my legs. While I was trying to do that, I got battered by a wave and got kind of, separated from the guy really. So we had to kind of start the run-in for a second time.
With Flight Lieutenant Campbell as the pilot, Sergeant Allanson as the winchman, and the rest of the team, they overcame several further challenges before recovering the casualty onto the Sea King.
I'm delighted but really surprised, because it's just a reflection of what the SAR Force does day in, day out. The fact that myself and Dan have got awards here, Tom and Mike, who were in the crew as well, they were very much part of the team as well, and it just reflects everything that we train for.
Closer to home, but in front of 23,000 witnesses at the Air Day at RNAS Culdrose, Lieutenant Commander Chris Curter safely landed a Sea Fury T-20 after its engine lost power during a display. He's awarded an Air Force Cross, in the knowledge that every moment of the drama can now be seen on the internet.
Watching that last bit, yes, I know what's going to happen with the aeroplane, but each time I see those wheels touch down and then do that little wobble, it's still every single time it's like, oh. It's there, it's publicly available. That last bit was not the scary bit. What is not seen as the 15 seconds before where the world dropped out from before me. So yes, it's there. It's publicly available. But it could have been an awful lot worse.
The Associate of the Royal Red Cross is a military decoration awarded for exceptional services in military nursing. This year it's awarded to Squadron Leader Charlotte Thompson-Edgar. She's been instrumental in developing the Medical Emergency Response Team when there was no specific clinical training. From November 2007, she continued to develop the vital service and also introduced trauma risk management.
My first tour in 2007 highlighted to me that more training was required for our personnel and equipment, and actually somebody there to drive it forward and actually make sure that this capability just keeps getting better and better for those soldiers on the ground.
Private John Pyatt-Payne is awarded a Queen's Commendation for bravery. When the warrior patrol he was travelling in was blown up by an IED, he is the only uninjured soldier, relentlessly assisted and reassured those around him.
One was seriously injured and one was walking wounded, and that was just my vehicle alone, that was.
Demonstrating inspirational leadership and command presence whilst dealing with mass Afghan soldier casualties was Private Ben Spittle. He is honoured with the Queen's Commendation for valuable service.
One or two guys walk in with minor injuries, and then it just started to pile up really. I think at one point they brought in an ambulance with 3 guys on the back, and then another ambulance came in with a couple more guys on the back. So it went from a trickle to a flow quite quickly.
An Air Force Cross goes to Flight Lieutenant Tim Eddy, who safely evacuated all 182 civilians from South Sudan, even though his C-17 had a maximum passenger load of 102.
It was a great relief. Once we'd actually finally unloaded everybody who was at the airfield waiting to come, we were all worried about the possibility of leaving people behind, which is something we didn't even want to entertain. But fortunately, once we had managed to get everybody on board who was there, ready, willing and able to leave the country, yeah, it was a great sense of relief.
The tragic humanitarian disaster of Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines was where Lieutenant Wendy Frame shone. Her team were responsible for the re-establishment of 2 previously destroyed classrooms, which allowed children to go back to school, and the leadership of projects that saw fresh water and food go to the community, and a plan for the repair of some of the fishing boat engines. She's awarded an MBE.
A little bit daunting. We didn't know what to expect. We didn't know what we were going to be retasked to do initially, so the briefings we were given, you know, we could have been going on to mass fatalities to assist with the burial of, you know, fatalities. So when we actually arrived at the island and discovered there was no mass fatalities there, it was a relief, shall we say. But when we arrived, you could see the devastation, you know, roofs off, buildings demolished, and children, I mean, they just wanted shade. It was so hot and humid that they basically, if you stood long enough, they would actually stand behind you to get the shade. And I can remember that there was a massive palm tree, and we all thought the kids were playing a game, but they were actually lining up behind the palm tree just to be in the shade. And the welcome that we got from them was phenomenal.
Just hours after what's been an incredible day at Lancaster House, the recipients have a further invitation. These examples of the Force's finest are arriving at a very famous doorstep for a very special thank you. Usually a welcome from the Prime Minister and Defence Secretary like this is given to the Presidents of State from around the world. On this occasion, it's so that they could meet these military heroes. These 14 military heroes are only a representation of the 140 recipients receiving honours from Buckingham Palace later this year, regular and reservist, recognising the bravery and commendable service of all 3 services across the globe.